I had this thing about discipline, and I felt that the cast, my fellow cast members in Star Trek, were a little unruly at times. Too many jokes, too much fooling around, singing songs. So I called a meeting.
When the man who is Jean-Luc Picard tells you a Star Trek show has completely missed the point of Star Trek, you stop, you listen, and you start asking serious questions about what is happening to one of the most important science fiction franchises in television history. Knight of the British Empire. 7 seasons, 4 films, the defining voice of modern Star Trek, reportedly looked at Starfleet Academy, Paramount's newest entry in the franchise, and said, on record, that the creative team behind it are, quote, a bunch of wokists who think Star Trek is about lecturing the audience rather than inspiring them. That's not a Twitter complaint from a disgruntled fan. That's the heart and soul of the next generation drawing a hard line. Stay with me, because this story is more complicated and more important than the headline. This channel covers Star Trek, Hollywood, and the franchises that shaped a generation, with facts, not fan fiction. If that's your kind of content, subscribe and hit the bell. Before we get into what Stewart allegedly said and why, let's establish something that makes this story genuinely unusual. Patrick Stewart is not a culture warrior. He is not someone who throws the word woke around as a political weapon. For decades, Stewart has been one of Hollywood's most openly progressive voices, advocating for social justice, equality, and causes on the left side of the political spectrum without apology. He has never hidden those positions. He has never been shy about them. So when Patrick Stewart, of all people, is reportedly calling out a franchise property for being too politically heavy-handed at the expense of storytelling, that is not a reflexive conservative reaction to diversity. That is something else entirely. That is a man who has spent his entire professional life championing progressive values, telling the people currently running Star Trek that they have fundamentally misunderstood what progressive storytelling actually looks like. That distinction matters enormously, and it's the part of this story that the loudest voices on both sides of the culture war conversation tend to skip past. According to sources who claim to have been present at an industry event where Stewart was speaking candidly, the actor expressed serious frustration with the creative direction of Starfleet Academy. The specific quote circulating, unverified by official channels, has Stewart saying the team is more interested in checking boxes and pushing political agendas than in telling compelling stories about human potential and exploration. He reportedly invoked Gene Roddenberry directly, saying Roddenberry's original vision was about showing humanity at its best, working together to overcome challenges, not constantly highlighting division and grievance. Those are not the words of someone opposed to Star Trek's values. Those are the words of someone who believes those values are being misrepresented. Starfleet Academy on Paramount Plus centers on young cadets training at the iconic institution. Conceptually, it should be exactly what a flagging franchise needs: fresh characters, new energy, an entry point for younger audiences who didn't grow up with The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine. Here's what's actually being reported. First, the social commentary problem. Star Trek has always engaged with social issues. That's not the controversy here. The original 1960s series put an interracial kiss on network television. It depicted a diverse bridge crew at a moment in American history when that was genuinely radical. The Next Generation tackled individual rights, cultural relativism, and the ethics of artificial intelligence with a level of philosophical seriousness that network television almost never attempted. But, and this is the critical distinction, those shows used allegory. They embedded their commentary inside compelling science fiction narratives that respected the audience's intelligence enough to let them draw their own conclusions. Starfleet Academy, according to multiple early reviews and extensive viewer reaction, abandons that approach entirely. Characters reportedly deliver speeches that read like social media activism content transplanted directly onto the screen. Storylines are structured around contemporary political debates with minimal effort to translate them into genuine science fiction. The show, by numerous accounts, tells rather than shows, lectures rather than dramatizes, and trusts the audience far less than the franchise's best work ever did. Second, unity replaced by division. The foundational appeal of Star Trek, the thing that made it genuinely unique among science fiction franchises, was its vision of a future where humanity had moved past its worst impulses. Humans, Vulcans, Klingons, and dozens of other species working together in Starfleet despite centuries of conflict and difference. Not a perfect future. A struggling, complicated, sometimes failing future, but one oriented toward cooperation and shared purpose. Starfleet Academy reportedly spends significant narrative real estate on how cadets are divided along identity lines, how Starfleet itself perpetuates systemic inequality, and how the institution is structurally corrupt. These are not inherently invalid story angles. But when the franchise's entire emotional architecture is built on the aspiration that Starfleet represents, spending your debut season dismantling that aspiration raises a legitimate question. Why should anyone in this fictional universe want to be part of this? And why should anyone watching care? Third, characters as categories, not people. In The Next Generation, Picard's identity as a French-British intellectual who quotes Shakespeare and prefers archaeology to combat was specific. It was personal. It was human in the way that great character writing is always human, particular before it's universal. Data's struggle to understand emotion wasn't an allegory for a demographic group. It was the story of an individual wrestling with what it means to be alive. According to widespread fan complaints about Starfleet Academy, its characters function primarily as representatives of identity categories. Their backgrounds aren't texture, they're the entire point. Viewers report that characters seem designed to embody specific groups and deliver lines reinforcing those group identities, rather than to exist as fully realized individuals who happen to come from diverse backgrounds. That is, ironically, a less humanizing approach than what the franchise has historically done. Fourth, Starfleet as the villain. In every Trek series that worked, original, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, even Voyager at its best, Starfleet was an imperfect institution striving toward noble ideals. Officers made bad decisions. Leadership failed. The bureaucracy occasionally became an obstacle to doing the right thing. But the institution itself represented something worth fighting for, worth joining, worth believing in. Starfleet Academy reportedly frames the institution as fundamentally broken, riddled with discrimination, corruption, and systemic failure. That framing creates a narrative problem that no amount of character work can fully solve. If Starfleet isn't worth respecting, the cadets training there aren't doing something meaningful. And if their mission isn't meaningful, neither is the show. We're getting to the part about Stewart's direct investment in this franchise and what these reports could actually mean for Paramount's future with Star Trek. Don't go anywhere. Patrick Stewart didn't just play Jean-Luc Picard. He spent 7 seasons and 4 feature films building what Picard represents: reason, compassion, principled leadership, the belief that intellectual rigor and moral courage are not in conflict. That character became one of the most beloved figures in the history of American television, and Stewart's investment in that character went far beyond the paycheck. When Stewart returned for Star Trek, Picard on Paramount Plus, he had creative input into how the character was handled and what stories were told. That series had its own complicated relationship with the fanbase. Some appreciated the emotional closure it offered, others felt it didn't adequately honor the character or the next-gen ensemble. But Stewart was inside that production. He had influence. Starfleet Academy is the future of the franchise without him in it. And if that future represents a creative direction that Stewart believes betrays what the franchise is for, that affects this legacy of everything he contributed. The Next Generation doesn't exist in isolation. Its reputation is tied to the ongoing health and credibility of the Star Trek brand. If Starfleet Academy becomes the public face of what Star Trek means in 2026, that has retroactive implications for everything before it. That's why Stewart reportedly cares enough to say something. Legacy isn't abstract when you spent 30 years building it. Since Alex Kurtzman took over as the primary architect of new Star Trek content, the franchise has expanded dramatically. Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, Prodigy, and now Starfleet Academy. More Star Trek content has been produced in the Kurtzman era than in any comparable period in the franchise's history. The reception has been uneven. Discovery was divisive from its first season, with fans split on its darker tone and its departures from established Trek aesthetics. Strange New Worlds earned genuine praise for returning to an episodic format closer to classic Trek, but even that show has drawn criticism for heavy-handed messaging in individual episodes. Lower Decks worked as animated comedy, but wasn't carrying franchise weight. Picard was deeply divisive, with many longtime fans feeling that beloved next-generation characters were poorly served. Starfleet Academy was supposed to be the corrective. Younger, fresher, more accessible. Early indications suggest it is not functioning as intended. Ratings have reportedly been disappointing. Fan sentiment on social media runs significantly negative. Critical reception has been lukewarm. And now industry reports are circulating that Paramount executives are internally discussing potential changes to the show's creative approach or team for future seasons, though nothing has been officially confirmed. When the actor most associated with the franchise's creative peak is reportedly this dissatisfied, that is a signal Paramount cannot afford to read as noise. Here's where this conversation needs to be more honest than it usually gets. The argument is not about whether Star Trek should be diverse. The original series was diverse in 1966 when it was a genuinely radical act to put a black woman, a Japanese man, and a Russian officer on the bridge of a starship during the Cold War. The argument is not about whether Star Trek should address social issues. It always has. That's part of its DNA. The argument is about craft. It's about whether the social commentary is embedded in compelling storytelling or delivered as direct instruction. It's about whether characters are written as individuals or as representatives. It's about whether the franchise's fundamental emotional architecture, optimism, cooperation, the belief that humanity's best qualities can ultimately prevail, is being honored or systematically dismantled. Patrick Stewart, by every credible account of his character and career, believes in exactly the values that modern Star Trek claims to represent. The fact that he is reportedly this critical of Starfleet Academy is not evidence that he has changed his values. It is evidence that he does not believe this show is actually expressing them. That's the story, and it deserves a more serious conversation than most people are willing to have about it. Whether Paramount responds to this, from fans, from critics, and reportedly from one of their own most respected stars, will tell us everything about where this franchise is going. We'll be covering it. Subscribe so you're here when that conversation continues. Drop your take in the comments. Are you watching Starfleet Academy? Does Stewart's reported reaction match yours? This is the channel for the stories Hollywood would rather keep quiet. See you in the next one.